Why did Uzzah have to die? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 1 to 15. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 6, beginning at verse 1. Again David gathered all the choice men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who are with him from Baal Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, whose name is called by the name, the Lord of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. So they set the ark of God on a new cart, and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments of fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. And when they came to Nashon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. And David became angry because of the Lord's outbreak against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perizzah to this day. David was afraid of the Lord that day, and he said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" So David would not move the ark of the Lord with him into the city of David, but David took it aside into the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months. And the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. Now it was told King David, saying, "The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him, because of the ark of God." So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness. And so it was, when those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, that he sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. The reign of David over the entire nation of Israel has begun in earnest. David has captured Jerusalem from the Jebusites, built a palace there, fortified its walls, and stopped an invasion by the Philistines. Attention now turns from the political state of Israel to the religious state of Israel. From the time of the conquest of 1 Samuel 4, the tabernacle along with the Ark of the Covenant was at Shiloh, in the tribe of Ephraim. When the Philistines burned down Shiloh, the tabernacle seemed to move, but the Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant in that war with Israel. They returned it to Israel when God plagued them, and it eventually came to rest in 1 Samuel 6 in the house of Abinadab of Kirjath Jearim. Kirjath Jearim was in the tribal allotment of Judah, but it was not a priestly city. Since we're likely by now in between the 8th and 10th years of David's reign, maybe even a little more, that would bring our chronology down to about 1000 BC. Back when we studied 1 Samuel, we found that the Ark of the Covenant likely returned to Israel in about 1093 BC, meaning that it had spent almost 100 years in the house of Abinadab. We've seen the tabernacle at Nob, but here in 2 Samuel 6 it appears that for whatever reason, the Ark of the Covenant had not been reunited with it, perhaps because the tabernacle didn't seem to remain in one place, for it will be found at Gibeon late in the reign of David and before the temple was built by Solomon in Jerusalem. But the fact that the Ark of the Covenant wasn't in the city of David, Jerusalem, where the king was, seemed to bother David. But instead of inquiring of the Lord for direction, as he had twice done in chapter 5, David simply decided to move the ark on his own. He gathered 30,000 choice men of Israel, for this was going to be a celebration, and he came to the house of Abinadab to get the ark. Those who kept the ark didn't argue with David, for Uzzah and Ahio from the house of Abinadab accompanied David with the ark towards Jerusalem. To transport the ark, they used a new ox cart, pulled by oxen and guided by these two men, something that will have serious consequences in a few moments. As far as the route that they took from Kirjath Jearim, there are two possible routes. The more direct southern route is about 14 kilometers or 8.5 miles. The issue with it is that it's more hilly. The longer northern route that would take you through Gibeon, Ramah, and Gibeon would be about 22 kilometers or 14 miles. The advantage of this route, though, is it is less hilly. Which route they took is uncertain. However, based on what happened, a higher likelihood is that they took the more southern route, which contained more peaks and valleys. Continuing on, as we said earlier, transporting the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem was a cause for celebration, which is evident by David and Israel playing all sorts of musical instruments before the Lord. Some might like to use this passage to teach that instrumental music is acceptable in worship today, but again, this is an Old Testament passage that represents things under the Old Covenant that God had with Israel. If we want to know what God wants us to do today, we have to find it in the New Testament, something we will discuss as we continue our walk through the Bible. As they're traveling, though, they come to Nashon's threshing floor. The exact location we do not know. It is there that the oxen stumbles. It is ironic that the oxen stumbles here, for a threshing floor would have most likely been the flattest part of the journey. With the oxen stumbling, there was a danger that the Ark of the Covenant, upon which God said he is present between the cherubim, though he is in heaven, would fall to the ground. So Uzzah put out his hand to steady it. God's anger was kindled against Uzzah, and he died right there on the spot. Of course, Uzzah's death put a stop to the celebration immediately and actually caused David to become angry at God and afraid of God. Instead of bringing the ark to Jerusalem, he went aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite and placed it there. Obed-Edom, being described as a Gittite, would mean that he was from Gath-Rimmon, a city of the tribe of Dan, but that was a Levitical city given to the house of Kohath, something to remember for later. Now, just because Obed-Edom was from Gath-Rimmon doesn't mean that that's where we are, for that would have been traveling in the wrong direction. It simply means that that's where this man was originally from. And there the ark remained for 3 months, with the Lord blessing the house of Obed-Edom while it was there. With this part of the story now complete, let's circle back and deal with David and Uzzah. Was David wrong in wanting to bring the ark to Jerusalem? Well, when we get to our study of 1 Chronicles, the parallel story there would tell us that David's intentions are good. But the fact still remains that he didn't consult the Lord. If he had, he would have received further instruction, just as he did in chapter 5, meaning this entire situation would likely have been avoided. Now to Uzzah. Why did Uzzah have to die? Is God just so bloodthirsty that he is looking for a chance to strike men and women down, even when those men and women have good intentions, like steadying the ark from hitting the ground, which would have been bad? Well, for that, we need to remind ourselves of some of the instructions about the Ark of the Covenant. Back in Exodus 25, verses 14 and 15, we read, "You shall put the poles into the rings of the side of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. The poles shall be in the rings of the ark. They shall not be taken from it." So we can already see that the mode of transporting the ark was wrong here, as it wasn't being carried by the poles, but was on an ox cart. Why would they have done this? Perhaps it's because they knew that the Philistines had returned it this way back in 1 Samuel 6, and since it wasn't a problem for the Philistines, they thought it wouldn't be a problem for them. But remember, the Philistines weren't Israelites. They didn't know the law of Moses on that matter, and so God didn't hold them responsible for what they could not know. Israel should have known the law of Moses, and so God held them responsible for that. But there's more. For in Numbers 4, verses 4 to 6, and then verse 15, we read, "This is the service of the sons of Kohath in the tabernacle of meeting, relating to the most holy things. When the camp prepares to journey, Aaron and his sons shall come, and they shall take down the covering veil, and cover the ark of the testimony with it. Then they shall put on it a covering of badger skins, and spread over that a cloth entirely of blue, and they shall insert its poles." Skipping to verse 15. And when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath shall come to carry them. But they shall not touch any holy thing, lest they die. These are the things in the tabernacle of the meeting, which the sons of Kohath are to carry. Nowhere do we read that Abinadab's family was of the house of Kohath, and from the account in 1 Chronicles 15, we can probably conclude that they weren't, meaning not only was the wrong mode of transportation used, but the wrong people were transporting it. But regardless of that, Kohathite or non-Kohathite, nobody was allowed to touch the ark of God, the place where the Lord dwelled between the cherubim, lest they die. That's why Uzzah had to die. God didn't act rashly or capriciously. He told Israel what to do and how to do it, and he gave them consequences for disobeying. Israel should have known the law, they disobeyed, and these were the consequences. Thus David had nobody to be angry with but himself. And after 3 months, David must have learned what he did wrong and repented. For from the broader account in 1 Chronicles 15, the second time he moved the ark, he did it the proper way, with the staves on the shoulders of the sons of Kohath. This second time was a truly joyous occasion, one of worship, for they sacrificed to the Lord after going only 6 paces. David was dancing a dance of joy, not a sinful, sensual dance, and wearing a linen ephod similar to what the priests wore. I don't believe David was trying to say he was a priest by wearing this ephod, for that would have been wrong. But by wearing an ephod, David was showing himself to have a priestly character, one of righteousness, humility, and reverence before God. This entire event, though, shows us today about the importance of worshiping God God's way. In the beginning, David did things his way, and people paid the consequences for their disobedience. David repented, did things God's way, and all went well. For us, let's look to the New Testament. Worship God the way he wants us to, the way he has revealed to us, and all will be well with us. Let's seek to obey God in all things. With that, our time is up today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 16 to 23. As we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.